Before there was ever WikiLeaks, there was Cryptome. The website Cryptome.org has been publishing information prohibited by governments. This includes classified and secret documents on U.S. soil since 1996. Now, the co-founder of that site joins me now to tell us more. John Young, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Now, as I said, Cryptome.org has been in the business of making government secrets public long before WikiLeaks was. Tell us a little bit about the history and philosophy of your website.
The site was set up principally to publish information about communication security, which is the fundamental technology for keeping secrets. And it grew out of my participation in a group called Cypherpunks, which was also a group where Julian Assange learned his skills. And so that this group was composed of very highly educated engineers, scientists, and technicians who were mostly working for corporations and government on the technology of communication security. And they knew that this was going to come into the private market as the Cold War wound down, and they wanted to get information out to the public about what was coming. So we set up this site to make that information available from people who had access to it but did not want to be identified as a source.
Now, in all of the time that you've been doing this, it's attracted the attention of the FBI. I've read that you've said that FBI agents have come to visit you. What do you think their surveillance is about?
They use our site to see what's going on, and so that's something that's we've learned about sites like ours. They're left in place in order to watch who comes there and see what kind of information we put up. Government authorities run these sites of their own, and they watch other sites like ours. We've learned this over time, is that the reason we haven't been shut down is we're useful to them to see what kind of attention is paid to this material. We think they actually feed us material to put up as they're feeding information to WikiLeaks and many other sites that operate the same way. But in terms of their being able to see everything we're doing, we know that we cannot keep any secrets about our site, and we tell our readers, you should not expect us to protect you, because we're being watched, and every other site is being watched, just like WikiLeaks is being watched. So there's no secrecy on the internet, and we make that clear. That's the lesson we've learned, and we now try to spread that, that you have to be very aware of the internet, which is a very large-scale spying machine.
What really, really motivates you, though, to expose these secrets? Why is this your vocation? Why do you feel strongly that this needs to happen?
Well, because secrecy is the biggest enemy of democracy, and it's way overdone. And so threats to democracy are coming from the inside, from the secret keepers, and that they need to be exposed. It has become a huge industry. It's extremely expensive, and you can't criticize it. You can't get access to it, because those who go inside that world are sworn to lifetime secrecy about it, and they can never talk about it. And I'm saying that's a system that is anti-democratic, and it's a big business now. Thousands of firms have been drawn into it since 9/11 because it's very lucrative. And so we need to have less secrecy in Congress, less secrecy in the presidency, less secrecy in all forms of government.
Let me ask you this, though. Some of your criticism is about not vetting information, publishing the addresses, for example, home addresses of CIA agents, or detailed maps of government facilities saying that this is endangering people's lives, this is welcoming attacks and giving people, details on how to commit them, and that there needs to be some kind of distinction between what's acceptable to put out there for the public and what's not. What do you say to those critics?
Well, I say to those critics that they're pulling the authoritative trick, acting like they know better. We don't pull that trick. We don't think we know better than ordinary people about how to judge information. But we know that authorities are always saying things like you just said. You're going too far. You're putting lives at risk. There's blood on your hands.
Are you?
No.
Are you putting lives at risk by publishing the addresses of a CIA agent at home?
This has been going on for years, and they always pull this. We've been told by former spies these are just standard reactions to this to get sympathy for them. They, in fact, will leak that kind of information themselves. You should know that governments leak more information than all the rest of us put together for their own purposes.
Like what? Give us an example.
Well, as they leak secrets. They get lax. They run operations to leak secrets to test their own system. Their own disgruntled employees are encouraged to leak secrets, and let's see what happens. They leave laptops around as though left behind by a drunk. They leave papers around. They put stuff on WikiLeaks. These are all well-known techniques to alarm the public, create sympathy, and get more funding. So this is a business. And so that we would like to say, well, why don't we talk about that? Is there a better way to do that than to deceive the public about this? Why don't we just own up to it? For example, the U.S. military loses more secrets than any other single organization, but they never admit it because they say that would aid the enemy. Well, why not be candid about that your systems are leaking?
Talking about how the government will leak information purposely to test their systems or to garner more support. Do you have an example of that?
Well, I can only say that there are schools to train people like Bradley Manning in doing just that on the Internet. It's at Fort Huachuca. This is one of their training syllabuses that we publish. Is they actually teach young people how to run these sting operations by leaking information to test the system. They have something called A teams and B teams that do combat on the Internet by leaking this stuff. They've hired hackers to do that. Hackers, in fact, are favorite employees now of such groups. And so this is talked about at hacker conferences about how you can get in on this. You can pick up good money by, one, being an informant. Two is running these test systems, infiltrating systems, sending out false information. But this is not new. This has been going on ever since there has been a spy world. And so I'll just say the Internet is now used for that purpose.
What does it achieve, though?
Well, it achieves, one, funding. If you don't have threats, you don't need the system.
So leaking threats, so then people say, oh no, this is scary, this information that has randomly, surprisingly gotten out, so we need to go support whatever our government is saying it needs in terms of ramping up Homeland Security funding or breaching civil liberties in the name of protecting against terrorism, that sort of thing? Is that what you're...
In fact, the latest one that perfectly matches WikiLeaks is called cybersecurity. We have a brand new cyber command that's just been given a huge amount of money. It's been in the works, so ever since the Internet popped up, cybersecurity. And so if WikiLeaks hadn't invented itself, let's assume that it did, it would have been invented. Because this is a gold mine for people who deal in cybersecurity. And don't forget, most of this work is handed out to contractors and universities and research institutions, and so it's widely based money flow. And so without that, we would have no Defense Department, we'd have no national security apparatus, we'd have less need for a president or a Congress. So one of the things that's important to keep in mind here is that this is a deeply entrenched approach. Now, it turns out I'm not anti-government, I'm anti-secret government.
But aren't there some things that, for national security reasons, it's better for the public to not know?
No.
You don't think there's any?
No, I'm saying that needs to be more openly discussed. Right now, it's a knee-jerk reaction. I see far too many sensible people saying that. And then we need to talk more about what the Internet threat is and what is cyber threat. Can you give us an example? And why are so many leaks coming from inside these security systems rather than outside? And why is that happening? Why are your systems so poorly secured that you can't control your own system? Now, that's out there as documentation. And one of the ways, though, you cover up your own faults is to raise a new threat and blame other people. So that's what we see coming with WikiLeaks. It's going to be blamed for the State Department's own failure to protect its own material. More importantly, the military is trying to deflect attention for how did Bradley Manning or whoever it was did this, and we don't know for sure it was Bradley Manning. How did this happen? This is supposed to be the most powerful, most adept, well-funded military system in the world.
How did it happen?
Well, first thing, it's a sting operation. It didn't happen the way it said. It has all the earmarks of one.
What are those for an average person like myself who wouldn't know?
Some low-level employee was able to get access to a classified system, and he just had this bright idea to take it and give it off to someone. That's almost a joke in cybersecurity world, because that's exactly what you do to test the system. But mainly you got to have some credibility that it's the real thing. And so it's almost as though it was a plot to do exactly this.
Who benefits in that scenario?
Cybercom does. They just got a huge funding. They were having trouble getting it on its feet. And so now they got a huge fund. They got a huge contract they're handing out. The conference I mentioned where NSA admitted that it can't secure networks was a business conference to contractors who want contracts to help secure the Internet in response to the WikiLeaks threat and others like it.
Clarify, what is CyberCon?
CyberCon is a PR stunt by the Defense Department. The NSA is extremely adept, has been doing exactly what CyberCon does for many, many years. But because the Internet is a very popular topic, they have broken out a new thing called Cyber Command, which will deal with cyber threats. but it's still run by NSA. It's housed at NSA. The head of it is the head of NSA. And so it's just a marketing stunt. And so I think that cyber threats will probably eventually replace terrorist threats. You know, there's been this claim that terrorists are using the internet to plot attacks on us. So it's a kind of wedding of the two. And so these kind of accusations of these knee-jerk congressional people about WikiLeaks being a terrorist is exactly part of that pattern. It's a repeat of the Red Menace and all these other kinds of fabricated menaces. And so now they've got a fabulous opportunity to say, well, the enemy is already inside the U.S. and they're on the internet because we set it up, it's ours, and they've infiltrated us.
What about people that would listen to your take on that and say that just sounds like a conspiracy theory?
Well, conspiracy theory was invented by the spies. No one does more conspiracy theory than spies do. The national security apparatus cooks up conspiracy theories all the time, but they put out this story that it's just conspiracy theory, as though it's contemptible. But in fact, they're the ones who cook up the threats that are far more complex and bizarre than anything we ordinary people could ever cook up, and they get billions to fight it. So they're almost diabolically conspiratorial. So let me call myself a skeptic, and I'm willing to learn, welcome criticism. I don't mind these terms of being a dissident, a conspiracy theorist. Those are all throwaway terms, as Obama says, off my shoulder. Don't be fooled by that. There are much worse terms coming.
Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.